All right. 1 second. All right, we're live. Cool. All right, so my name's Chris Berry, certified law attorney, certified financial planner with Castle Wealth Group, and we do these weekly wisdom webinars every Wednesday at 1 o'clock, unless I'm traveling or we have something else going on. Next week, we're going to have an in-person estate planning workshop at the Novi library at 2 o'clock. So we won't have our usual webinar, but if you are in the Novi area and want to attend our estate planning workshop, just give our office a call. I think we still have some space left for that. But I start these every week with a positive focus, just something positive that happened over the past week, either professionally or personally. And just personally, I have 2 kids. They're Madison's 9 and my son, Ryan, he's 11. And obviously Father's Day was a great day, but had opportunity Saturday night to spend it with my daughter. She had a Girl Scout camping event at the Toledo Zoo, where it's called the Zoo Snooze. So I was with our Girl Scout troop. So that was great to spend some time with her. And then last night, my son and I went to a Dave Matthews concert. So he's a big fan of Dave Matthews Band. So am I. So we went to Pine Knob together, and it was his first concert, like kind of big adult concert. So that was kind of fun. He's a tired cookie though today. He stayed up a little later than he's used to, but hey, it's summer. What are you going to do? So, all right. With that, we'll go ahead and get started. And again, if you do have any questions, please put it into the Q&A to make sure that we get it addressed. Otherwise, I have 3 questions that were submitted ahead of time. And if you have questions, feel free to email them over during the week, just so I can kind of plug them in, and we can go ahead and address that. All right, so let me click a few buttons. Now I should be seeing my screen. And let me click a few more buttons, make sure I have everything up I need. Okay, cool. All right, so this is just general advice. If you want to see how this applies to your situation, book some time on my calendar to address it. First question. Married couple can purchase IBonds. So we've been talking a lot about IBonds. Interestingly enough, like IBonds have not always been like this hot commodity that they have been the last year or so. Reason for that is they're tied to inflation. So with inflation being so high, each individual can put $10,000 to $15,000 a year, depending on their tax return, into a IBond, which basically resets every 6 months based on inflation. Right now, I think it's over like 9% rate of return over the next 6 months. There's some limitations with the IBonds. The biggest limitation is that you can only put in $10,000 basically per, not person, I'll say entity. So let's say we have a married couple. Let's say we have a husband, he can do 10,000, a wife, she can do 10,000. Let's say they have a trust, the trust can do 10,000. And that's really kind of the max, unless you're using some of your tax return. And the cool thing about them right now is that you can get about a 9% rate of return. Historically, it's been around like 1%, 2%, 3%. So it hasn't been really that great. But with inflation being so high, it is an interesting opportunity. Now, again, you can only put in about $10,000 per person. So it's for like larger estates. It's not really moving the needle, but it's 10,000 that's probably doing better than sitting in cash right now. So the question here is, a married couple can purchase $30,000 of IBonds, each spouse plus a trust. The trust cannot be a beneficiary. So who do you name as beneficiary of the non-trust owned IBonds? So you have a couple options. One is you could name a person. And again, this is like a $10,000 account. So at the end of the day, it's not that big. Like if you have a $1 million IRA, what's $10,000? So I'm fine naming like a person, like naming one of the kids or multiple kids outright versus naming the trust. The trust typically would be the bigger assets, but if it's a $10,000 account or $20,000 account going to individual, I don't have a problem with that. Also, worst case, you could name the estate, And you would think that, well, if it goes into the estate, then it's going into probate. But here's the thing: if the amount of your estate is greater than or less than, let me make sure I do this right. I'm working with my son on pre-algebra, so we're doing the greater than less than. So if your estate is less than $20,000, this can be wrapped up at one day, where you don't have to even worry about like a full probate. So let's say that you just named your estate as a beneficiary of your IBond. Worst case scenario, your loved one would have to go to fill out a one-page affidavit at the probate court, and everything would be wrapped up within a day. So we wouldn't have to worry about that full 5-month probate process. So who would you name as a beneficiary, since you can't name a trust? Now, if you name the trust as the owner, that's not a big deal. The successor trustee steps in and manages things. And if you're to do an IBond, I'd always start first with like the trust, just because it's clear, it avoids probate. You have a clear path for what happens when you pass away. So first, trust. But if you're not doing a trust, then you would name like a beneficiary, which could be a spouse or children. And then if not, worst case, you can name the estate. So, but again, like at the end of the day, it's $10,000. Like it's not that big of a deal if it's not flowing into the trust with the rest of the assets. So hopefully that was helpful. IBonds really have been like a hot topic recently. Great opportunity. A lot of limitations. The biggest limitation is it's just like a $10,000 per entity limitation. So we can't put $100,000 into something that's giving you a guaranteed 9% rate of return. Some of that money you have sitting in cash, yeah, let's throw it into IBond for a year, get a better rate of return than having it just sit in cash. All right, so that is our IBond question for the day. Let me see if we have any other questions. Okay, all right, this next one, this one's a meaty question. So with the current market situation, what are some options in terms of investments? Where can I protect against losing more in the market? So yeah, for most people, they look at how their investments are doing year to date. And as of today, I think the S&P 500, which is one of the major indexes that people look to check market strength, we're down like 22% as of today, year to date, which this is officially, we're now in a bear market. And then now we have the Feds who are considering what to do with interest rates, because we also have this, it's like a double-edged sword. On one hand, we have markets dropping. Actually, I'd say it's a triple-edged sword right now. We have markets dropping, so equities are dropping. Bonds are not performing. So a lot of people look at that kind of equity or stocks and bonds portfolio, with the bonds being the counterbalance to the stocks, but the bonds aren't even performing right now. So that's the double-edged sword. And then the third edge of that sword is we have soaring inflation at almost record amounts, where if you have money just sitting in cash, you look at, like I just looked at getting gas the other day, and it's like $5.10. I remember when we were in the twos, like, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago. So just looking at gas, it's like doubled in the past couple months. So inflation is this other issue. And so this is a common question, and a question that was submitted, or a common conversation that I've had. And this was a question submitted this past week. Okay, I'm concerned about what's going on with the markets. What do I do? And so first, let's talk about what is going to happen maybe in the future. And no one can predict the future, but most likely there's going to be a lot of volatility. Initially, we were thinking for at least the rest of the year, but not to get political, but most likely until at least the next political election, presidential election, more specifically. So I think there's going to be a lot of volatility. There's a lot of red flags and warning signs. And we look back to 2008, and we could kind of trace what caused 2008, and we understood it like after the fact. But if you look at what's going on now, it seems like there's a lot more variables than there were in 2008. So I understand where people are coming from in terms of concerns. When is the market going to rebound? Because it always does. It's just a matter of when. but a lot of people are talking about continued volatility throughout not only the rest of the year, but until we get to the next presidential election. And again, it's not to be political, but there's just a lot of uncertainty right now, and the markets reflect that. So what are the options, or what are the things to consider? So the first thing I always start with is we need to make sure what are your income needs, okay? So really what we're talking about here is time horizon. When do we think we need to access the money? Because that's going to help us understand what options do we have available. I had a call from an individual who just sold a property, and he was asking, well, where should I invest my money? And I asked, well, what do you plan on doing with the money? And he said, well, I plan on investing in another piece of real estate with another 6 months. I was like, well, that really kind of handcuffs the options that we have. Or let's say you're in retirement and you're having to draw on your assets right now. You're having to pull from your investment account or your IRA or 401k. The answer I'm going to give you in that situation is going to be different than, hey, you know what, my Social Security, my pension, I'm good in terms of income. This isn't money that I'm going to need for the next 4 or 5 years. The answer is going to, of what you should do with the money as a certified financial planner, is going to depend really on what are your income needs. And really what I'm getting at is time horizon. If we have this money in the market and we're concerned about how the market's performing, what is the time horizon of when we're going to have to access what's there? And that's going to be the first question. And then once we kind of figure that part out, then, okay, what are the options in terms of investments? These are just kind of big picture. Every situation is going to be a little bit different. And I'm not putting these in any specific order. I'm just laying out what are some of the common options, given that all this volatility in the market and people are concerned about losing everything they work so hard for. So first option is going to cash. And really what I plan on doing is just going over the pros and cons of each option. When I saw this question come in, it was a conversation I've already been having with clients. And so these are the common options that we go through, just weighing the pros and cons for each individual situation. So the advantage of going to cash, we limit our losses, okay? There's probably going to be a lot of volatility for the next year or two with all of the uncertainty. We're not out of the pandemic. We're not out of the supply chain issues. We're not out of the employment issues, small business. I think we're going to have a commercial real estate issue. The Fed is flip-flopping on what they're doing. So there's a lot of volatility. And there's not to say that market might dip even further than the 22% we're at with S&P right now. So we're going to limit our losses. The downside of this is that with inflation where it's at, and again, this is where there's no easy answers, but with inflation where it's at, if you have your money just sitting in cash, you're not keeping up with inflation. You're not keeping up with the cost of gas even. So plus, if the market's going to rebound sooner rather than later, you're going to miss the upside of the market. And you can look back historically, and emotional or selling low and buying high, kind of that emotional knee-jerk reaction of investing is never a long-term strategy. But that said, like, cash is an option. We can go to cash. Another option, and I don't like to talk about specific tools very often, but this is an option, is that we can look at something. We can basically look at something of saying, you know what, let's get a 2.5% guaranteed return over the next year, and then we can reallocate, or we can re-examine where things are at. So rather than going to cash where we're not earning anything, there are some investment options, more specifically a tool. It's actually an insurance product, but that's not really the purpose, but it's called Legacy Excel, where we can get a guaranteed 2.5% rate of return over the next year. So we have to give up some liquidity. The idea is that we're not going to touch this money for a year, but rather than having it sit in cash, at least we can get 2.5%. Not keeping up with inflation, but it gives us a better option than just having a lot of money sitting in cash. It is a little more complicated than that, but if we're comfortable locking our money up for a year, almost think of it like a CD alternative, we can get at least a 2.5% rate of return. Better than having the money sit in cash, better than anything offered by a CD right now. And I have a few clients doing this right now, just to buy us some time to see where things are going to go. The other option, if we're looking more long-term with this, is we can look at tools that offer safety, meaning principal protection, we can't lose anything, but also we can look at growth, collecting the upside of the market. Where if the market does go up over the next couple of years, you'll be collecting that upside of the market. And there's things that can be tied to the S&P 500 where we collect, if the S&P 500 goes up, we collect the upside of the market. We can even look at replicating those 60-40 portfolios of 60% stock, 40% bonds, but adding in the principal protection. So if the market does go down, you don't lose anything. But if the market goes up, you're going to collect the upside of the market. Okay. Now, the downside of this is you're giving up some liquidity, meaning we can't access the funds right away. Otherwise, there'd be fees tied to it. And then also the other thing is if the market does continue to go down, you're going to collect a zero in terms of return, but you're happy taking a zero versus a negative 20% rate of return. So that's also another option. Another option, and I have a lot of clients in this situation, we just stay the course. You know what? If we're investing in the markets, we understand that there's going to be ups and downs. Prior to this year, we were on a really 13, 14-year bull run where the market just continued to go up, 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 up. And obviously, at some point, there's going to be a correction. There's going to be a bear market at some point. And if you have this as part of a plan, understanding that maybe this is like later bucket money we're not having to draw on right away, we just stay the course and understand that, yeah, this is what the markets do. They go up and down, and there is going to be volatility. Markets don't always go up, and we need to understand that. And so maybe we just stay the course. This is where a lot of my clients are at this point. Another option is, you know what? Let's lean into this a little bit. Let's look at that portfolio that we have. And if there is a dip, now's a great time to buy. Now's a great time to lean into the market. Again, we're probably going to have volatility for the next year or two. But if we've had a 20% drop in the market, maybe it drops another 5%, but it's going to rebound at some point. So now's maybe time to look at being more aggressive if we do have a longer time horizon. Another option is we can go more tactical. So a lot of times I favor more of a passive low fee portfolio where we're trying to minimize expenses, minimize trading inside of the account, more of a buy and hold strategy, let the markets do what they do. But we can have more actively managed portfolios where we appoint a portfolio manager that looks at things on a daily basis, getting in and out of the market, trying to time the market correctly. So we could move to more of a tactical portfolio as well. And then also just looking at opportunities and options. If you have pre-tax dollars like IRA, 401k, now's the time to look at kind of a IRA exit strategy. So most people think taxes are going up in the future. In fact, they're scheduled to with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, where if we do have pre-tax accounts, almost think of it, where is it? Here we go. Think of it almost like a slinky at this point. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for a second. So think of it like a slinky. So let's say you have a pre-tax IRA account, right? The market just shrunk. So the value of your IRA shrank. Now's the perfect time to look at moving pre-tax dollars out of that IRA to something else, maybe into an asset protection trust. We call that a trust conversion, or maybe to a Roth IRA conversion. And now we can get the growth, which is going to happen at some point, we don't know when, inside of that post-tax or tax-free or asset protected account. So now's a perfect time to look at moving money from those pre-tax accounts into something else. And that's where we look at your tax returns, look at the tax brackets, and we try to figure out what is the optimal amount to move. Because think about it, if you have XYZ mutual fund and it just went from 100 to 70, well, let's pay the tax, move it out of the IRA, and then now we can collect that growth from 70 back to 100 or 120 post-tax outside of that IRA. And that's really, from a strategic opportunity standpoint, like kind of the silver lining in this is that if you do have pre-tax accounts, now's the perfect time to look at moving money from those accounts. The rest of these options are just more of investment options of, hey, what do we do given this market downturn? How do we stay invested? So those are some of the common options. But something that everyone should be looking at is if you do have pre-tax accounts, now's the time. Don't wait till the end of the year. Now's the time maybe to think about moving money from those pre-tax accounts. Yeah, so hopefully that is helpful. No one likes to see the markets going down, but those are some of the common options based on your situation. And then the one thing that I think everyone should consider, and we've been banging this drum for a while, look at now's a good time to think about pulling money from those pre-tax accounts. All right. That brings us on to question number 3. Let me see if I have any questions or comments. No. Okay. All right. Okay. Number 3. So my mom served in the Navy during Korea and is now going into assisted living. We're working on getting the VA benefit, and they're thinking about selling the house. Okay. All right. So here's the thing. So we have this VA benefit, which is one of the ways to pay for long-term care. And if we have a veteran or a surviving spouse of a veteran, we can bring in additional funds to help pay for that benefit. There's 5 requirements for the VA benefit, and more specifically, we're talking about the aid in attendance, or sometimes called the non-service connected pension. But there's 5 requirements for this. So first, 90 days active duty. Second, cannot be dishonorably discharged. Third, 1 day during a period of conflict. So this has to be like World War II, Korea, Vietnam. Fourth, and this is where it gets a little more complicated, more long-term care costs, or long-term care costs that are greater than income. So we need to be paying out $3,000, $4,000 a month for long-term care and having $2,000 or $3,000 a month of Social Security pension coming in. And then 5th, now there's an asset test where I think this year the number is if we have more than 138 of assets, then we're not going to qualify. Okay. Plus, since 2008, there's a 3-year look back. Okay. We meet all those requirements, then we can bring in extra $1,000 to $2,000 a month to help pay for home care, assisted living, or nursing home care. So it's a cool benefit. Now, in this situation, let's say we have mom here, and I didn't include this right in the question they submitted, but mom had about $88,000 right now in cash and then had a home. Okay. So the family already submitted a VA application working with their veteran service organization, but they knew that they're going to have to sell the home. And let's say this home's valued at $150,000, sell the home to help pay for the assisted living, because otherwise mom's money is just going to dwindle. Whoops. All right. Mom's money is just going to dwindle until she runs out of money for assisted living. So they knew they were going to have to sell the house. Now, if they were to sell the house, all of a sudden that's going to put them over the asset limit, right? 150 plus the 88. But what we can do is we can set up a Veterans Asset Protection Trust, which is a form of asset protection trust. move the house into the trust, even within the 3-year look back period. Now the house is in the trust, and the VA doesn't care if you transfer the exempt asset into a trust. And then we can sell it, and now the money is 100% protected. And now this $150,000 or whatever they sell the house for, that's protected. Mom still gets her VA benefit. And then the family can open up the trust and use the money to help pay for mom's care moving forward. And then if mom passes away, the money can go to the kids. So rather than spending this money down and losing that VA benefit, we were able to protect the proceeds of the home, have her maintain that VA benefit, and then also build in Medicaid protection if mom were to need nursing home care in the future. So yeah, so if we do have veterans who serve 90 days active duty, 1 day during a period of war, we're not dishonorably discharged, there are certain ways that we can bring in additional benefits to help pay for that care. So hopefully that was helpful. All right, we have a 4th question that just came in. And again, if you do have questions, please put it in the Q&A because this is the last one I have. All right, so when converting to Roth, so doing Roth conversions, does it still make sense if you don't convert the whole thing, since you pay taxes now on a ratio when there's deductible and non-deductible funds in traditional IRA? Deductible versus non-deductible. All right, so this is a little bit confusing here, but there's what's called deductible IRAs and non-deductible IRAs. Not many people actually have non-deductible IRAs. It's typically, it might be if you overfund your IRA or overfund like a 401k, something like that. So typically we don't see a lot of non-deductible IRAs. Mostly people have deductible, tax deductible IRAs. And what we do when we're dealing with the tax deductible IRAs, we would just look at your tax returns and look at your tax brackets to see how much space we have in the different tax brackets, or the tax bracket before you jump up into the higher tax bracket. And I'll say right now, most people tend to fall in the 22% tax bracket. So this, I would always do kind of Roth conversions or trust conversions into the 22% tax bracket. But even if you're normally naturally at the 22%, typically I would still go up to the 24. And the reason for that is your 22% is going to 25 or 28% in 2026. And this gives us more space, which for a married couple is about $380,000 that we could convert. That'd be for deductible. Non-deductible, that's a little more confusing. And a little more of a specialized situation. So I don't want to spend too much time on that one. Another couple questions coming in here. Do I pay taxes on my IBonds every year? You know what, to be honest, I don't know off the top of my head. I feel like it would be only when it's redeemed you would pay taxes on the IBonds. And again, IBonds really have only been hot like within the last couple months with all the inflation. So that's why I don't know the answer off the top of my head. But my understanding would be that you would pay it when you redeem it and you would pay capital gains on it. What is the best way for you can pay IBonds on a accrual or cash basis but stay consistent? All right, that sounds fair. What is the best way for US resident with Canadian RRSP to repatriate in the most tax efficient manner? That is way above my pay grade. I know US law, I don't know Canadian or the interplay between the two. In that situation, we'd have to get someone that's familiar with both sides of the coin. And that is unfortunately not me. I only know so much. All right. Whoops. I didn't mean to stop video. I'm going to stop share. Another question. If you start taking widow SSA benefits and need to stay below 19.5 in income, can you convert IRA traditional to IRA Roth like $500,000 during that year, or does that count against the income? No, that's going to count towards your income. That's the downside of doing Roth conversions, and that's why we're looking at your tax brackets on an annual basis. But yeah, if you're to do a $500,000 Roth conversion, that would all be income for that year. So that would jump you up into the, if you're widowed or single, the highest, I think that's the highest marginal tax bracket. Nope, that's the second highest marginal tax bracket. Yeah. So if you did $500,000, you'd be at the 35% tax bracket for a single individual. Married couple, 500,000 would also be the 35% tax bracket. But yeah, that would jump you way up in income. So if your goal is stay below 19.5 in income, yeah, Roth conversions, that's going to be added to your income. Okay. All right. Well, with that, again, we're not going to be meeting next week. We have a presentation at the Novi Library on estate planning at 2:00. I think we still have some spots left. So if you are interested in learning about estate planning and different trusts, this is our workshop. We used to do it almost on a weekly basis prior to the pandemic. We call it planning for the second half of life in 3 easy steps: legal, financial, and tax planning. And we're going to be doing it next Wednesday at 2:00 at the Novi Library. If you're interested in that, just shoot us a line or email and we can get you signed up. But no weekly webinar next week. So with that, thank you.